Chapter 1. The Great Bestiary of Nirn. To understand the beasts, monsters and entities that inhabit our world, we must look far beyond their teeth, claws and venom. We must look to the very fabric of their existence. To the untrained eye, a dragon soaring above the throat of the world, a scamp scurrying through a portal from oblivion, and a timber wolf hunting in the forests of Cyrodiil are merely different kinds of beasts, but to the scholars of the Imperial Library, they represent entirely different states of being. Every living thing in our universe is shaped by the ancient, eternal struggle between two primal forces, Anu, the force of stasis, order and light, and Padme, the force of chaos, change and darkness. Every creature that walks, flies or crawls across the face of Nirn is defined by how much of these primal forces they carry within their souls. Let us begin with the Anuic beings, those entities that carry the pure spark of stasis. To understand these creatures is to understand the concept of eternity. The most prominent Anuic entities on Nirn are the Dove, the dragons. They are not mere animals, nor are they typical monsters. They are the direct children of Akatosh, the dragon god of time, who is himself one of the greatest Anuic spirits. Because they are born of stasis, dragons do not experience the world as we do. They do not age, they do not reproduce, and they do not naturally die. A dragon simply is. When you look into the eyes of a dragon, you are looking at an entity that existed before the first mortal stone was laid on Nirn, and which will exist long after the mortal races have crumbled to dust. This Anuic nature gives dragons their terrifying power, but it also defines their metaphysical limits. Their minds are consumed by a natural urge to dominate, to impose their own unchanging will upon the world around them. This is because stasis demands control. They cannot tolerate change or rebellion, for these are padomaic concepts. Yet, this absolute connection to stasis is also their greatest vulnerability. Because they are creatures of pure, eternal time, they cannot comprehend the concept of mortality. They do not understand what it means to have an end, to die, or to cease to exist. This is why the ancient Nord heroes were able to defeat them using the Thu'um known as Dragonrend. By speaking words of pure mortality into the mind of a dragon, they forced an eternal, Anuic being to experience the terrifying concept of temporary existence. The shock of this realization is so great that it grounds the beast, shattering its connection to the eternal sky. Furthermore, because dragons are Anuic, their physical bodies can be broken, but their souls cannot be destroyed by normal means. When a dragon is slain, its flesh decays, but its soul remains anchored to its bones, waiting for a stronger power to resurrect it. Only another dragon, or a mortal blessed with the blood of the dragonborn, can truly consume a dragon's soul, absorbing its power and erasing its consciousness from the world forever. Without this intervention, the dragon is merely sleeping, bound to the earth but never truly gone. In stark contrast to these eternal beings of stasis are the padomaic entities, creatures born of pure change, chaos, and the deep void. These are the Daedra, the inhabitants of the infinite realms of oblivion. While the Daedra sacrificed their power to help build the mortal world, the Daedra refused. They chose instead to remain in the void, creating their own realms from their own chaotic essences. Because they are born from the blood of Padme, they are incapable of true creation. They can only alter, mimic, and corrupt what already exists. When we study the Daedra, from the smallest clanfear to the grandest Dremora, we see creatures that do not belong to the natural order of Nirn. They do not possess a mortal soul, which we call an Anuic vestige. Instead, they possess a padomaic animus. This animus is tied to the chaotic creative pools of the void, such as the azure plasm of Coldharbour. Because of this, a Daedra can never be killed in the mortal sense. If you strike down a Dremora with a sword, its physical body dissolves into dust, but its animus simply flies back to the void of oblivion. There, in the dark waters of its home realm, it will slowly gather chaotic matter and reform its body, ready to strike again. This makes the Daedra a constant, terrifying threat to the safety of Tamriel. They are tireless, immortal, and endlessly patient. However, their padomaic nature is also their limitation. Because they are creatures of pure chaos and change, they are bound to their specific natures. A Flamatronic cannot choose to be cold. A Dremora cannot choose to be merciful. They are slaves to the concepts they embody. Mortals can exploit this rigid nature through the school of conjuration. By learning the precise glyphs, names and rituals associated with these entities, a clever wizard can bind a Daedra's animus to their will, forcing a creature of pure chaos to obey strict, orderly commands. If the binding is broken, however, the Daedra will immediately turn on its master, driven by its natural urge to destroy order and restore chaos. Between these two extremes lies the third and most complex category of life in the Abyss, the mortal beings of Nirn. We, the humans, elves and beast races, along with the plants and animals of our world, are the product of a grand, tragic synthesis. When Lorcan, the trickster spirit of change, convinced the Daedra to create the mortal plane, those spirits had to give up their own power to form the physical world. The Daedra who gave the most of themselves became the Earthbones, the natural laws of Nirn. Others became the Elnofi, the ancestors of all mortal life, because our ancestors were a mixture of both Anuic and Padomaic blood. We carry both stasis and change within our souls. This duality is what defines mortality. Unlike the dragons, we are not eternal. We grow old, we wither, and we die. Unlike the Daedra, our bodies do not reform in the void when we perish. Our souls journey to the afterlife of Aetherius, leaving our physical shells to rot in the earth. We are fragile, susceptible to disease, and easily broken by the harsh environments of Nirn. Yet, this synthesis is also our greatest strength. Because we are not locked in stasis like the dragons, we are capable of learning, growing, and changing our destinies. We are not bound to a single concept like the Daedra. A mortal can choose to be peaceful one day and violent the next, to build a city or to burn it down. We possess the unique ability to create new things, to write new histories, and to reshape the world around us. This is something even the grandest Daedric princes envy, for they can only reshape what already exists, while mortals can bring entirely new ideas into being. When we look at the wild beasts of Tamriel, we see this mortal synthesis in its rawest form. A troll, a mammoth, or a slaughterfish is neither purely orderly nor purely chaotic. They are driven by the simple, balanced instincts of survival, hunger, and reproduction. They are part of the great cycle of life and death that Yef, the first Earthbone, established at the dawn of creation. They exist to maintain the balance of the natural world, acting as both predators and prey, keeping the delicate ecosystem of Nirn in a state of dynamic harmony. And Pimi, as scholars and defenders of the Empire, we must remember that the line between these classifications is not always clean. There are times when the boundaries blur, and when they do, the results are almost always disastrous. When a necromancer binds a padomaic spirit to a mortal corpse, they create an abomination that violates the natural laws of Arche. When a Daedric prince attempts to pull a portion of Nirn into their realm, they threaten to dissolve the stable, Anuic geometry of our world into the chaotic soup of oblivion. The Great Bestiary is not just a list of creatures to be feared or hunted. It is a map of the cosmic forces that fight for dominance over our very existence. By understanding whether a beast is Anuic, padomaic, or mortal, we gain the knowledge necessary to survive in a world where the gods themselves are constantly watching, waiting, and warring. As we continue our study of the specific monsters that haunt the dark corners of Tamriel, keep these fundamental truths in mind, for in the arena of Nirn, knowledge is the only shield that never breaks. Chapter 2. The Lords of Misrule, the Daedric Princes. To understand the true nature of the cosmos, we must look beyond the fragile boundaries of Nirn. We must look into the dark, infinite sea that surrounds our mortal world. This sea is oblivion. Unlike the Daedra, who gave up their power to create the mortal world and became bound by its laws. The Daedra refused to participate. They kept their raw, original power. Among them, 17 supreme spirits stand above all others. We call them the Daedric Princes. These are not merely gods in the traditional sense. They are living, breathing realities. They are forces of nature, and each prince is entirely identical to the realm they rule. A Daedric prince does not simply live in a plane of oblivion. The prince is the plane, shaped from their own thoughts, desires, and willpower. To study these entities is to look into a mirror of our deepest fears and darkest desires. They represent the extremes of existence, unchecked by mortal morality or the passage of time. For thousands of years, scholars of the Imperial Library have documented their influence on Tamriel. We have watched empires fall, heroes crumble, and the very sky tear open under their gaze. They are the lords of misrule, and their actions continue to shape the destiny of every living soul. We begin our examination with the most violent and active forces of change, Molag Bal and Merunez Dagon. Molag Bal is the prince of domination and enslavement. His sphere is the harvest of souls and the crushing of mortal will. His realm, Cold Harbour, is a horrifying mockery of Nirn. It is a freezing, ruined wasteland where the ground is made of ashes and the sky is always on fire. In Cold Harbour, mortals are treated as mere livestock, tortured for eternity to satisfy the prince's desire for control. Molag Bal does not wish to destroy our world. He wishes to enslave it, dragging Nirn into his own dark embrace. Wobble more time of the world. In contrast, Merunez Dagon seeks only destruction, revolution and change. He is the prince of ambition, and his sphere is the fire that burns away the old to make way for the new. His realm, the Deadlands, is a sea of molten lava and jagged black rock, constantly battered by violent storms. Dagon has invaded Tamriel multiple times, most notably during the Oblivion Crisis, when his giant four-armed manifestation walked the streets of the Imperial City. He represents the natural impulse to tear down walls, to rebel against authority, and to watch the world burn. For Dagon, peace is a stagnation that must be broken by force. While some princes seek to rule or destroy the physical world, others focus on the secrets of the mind and the flow of information. Hermaeus Mora is the prince of fate, knowledge and memory. He is a mass of tentacles and peering eyes, holding the answers to every secret that has ever existed. His realm, Apocrypha, is an endless library of black books and shifting green ink, floating in a toxic, dark green ocean. In Apocrypha, knowledge is a physical danger. Mortals who seek his forbidden truths often go mad, lost forever in the infinite corridors of his library. Mora does not care about good or evil. He cares only for the collection of facts, hoarding secrets like a dragon hoards gold. Varamina, the prince of nightmares and terror, also rules a realm of the mind. Her sphere is the dark space of sleep, where mortal defenses are down. Her realm, Quagmire, is a shifting dreamscape that changes every few minutes. One moment it is a beautiful palace, and the next it is a terrifying torture chamber. Varmena feeds on the fear of mortals, stealing their memories and leaving them with active, waking nightmares. To enter her realm is to lose control over what is real and what is fantasy. Then there is Sheogorath, the infamous Prince of Madness. His sphere is the unpredictable nature of the human mind, ranging from creative genius to violent insanity. His realm, the Shivering Isles, is divided into two distinct halves: Mania, a colourful land of artistic passion, and Dementia, a dark, swampy region of paranoia and depression. But Sheogorath has a secret. He was once Jiggalag, the prince of order and deduction. Jiggalag's sphere was absolute logic and perfect detail. He was so powerful that the other princes grew afraid of him and cursed him with madness, turning him into Sheogorath. Every 1,000 years, Jiggalag would return to conquer his realm, only to be turned back into the mad god once again. In the shadows of Tamriel's history, we find the princes of deception and plots. Boethiah is the prince of plots, treason and authority. She rules Attribution's share, a realm of constant battle and political betrayal. Boethiah teaches mortals that strength is the only true law, and that any leader who can be overthrown deserves to fall. She is the patron of warriors and politicians who use lies and assassinations to climb to power. Closely linked to Boethiah is Mephilah, the prince of lies, sex and murder. Mephilah's sphere is the secret threads that bind mortals together. Her realm, the spiral skein, is a dark web of lies and secrets where every string is pulled by her long, spider-like fingers. Unlike Boethiah, who encourages open conflict, Mephilah prefers to watch her victims destroy themselves from the inside through jealousy, secrets and betrayal. Nocturnal, the prince of shadow and mystery, is often called the night mistress. Her sphere is the dark, the unseen, and the luck that thieves rely on. Her realm, the Evergloam, is a world of perpetual twilight, where shadows have a life of their own. Nocturnal is one of the oldest and most mysterious of all the Daedra, and she demands absolute devotion from her followers, who act as her agents in the mortal world, moving unseen through the night. Azura stands apart from these dark figures. She is the prince of dawn and dusk, transition and prophecy. Her realm, Moonshadow, is a beautiful land of roses, silver cities, and warm wind. Azura is often seen as a loving mother figure by her followers, particularly the Dunmer and the Khajiit. However, she is also vain and highly possessive. Her love can quickly turn into a terrible curse if she feels betrayed or ignored. She is a reminder that even the most beautiful Daedra are driven by extreme, unchanging nature. In the wild places of the world, we encounter the princes of nature and the forgotten. Hircine is the prince of the hunt and the father of man-beasts. His sphere is the eternal struggle between the predator and the prey. His realm, the hunting grounds, is an endless wilderness of forests and grasslands, where beasts and mortals hunt each other under a blood-red moon. Hircine is the creator of Lycanthropy, the curse of the werewolf. He does not hunt out of malice, but out of a pure love for the chase, and he respects any prey that can survive his trials. Malakath is the prince of the spurned and the ostracized. He is the patron of the orcs, and all those who are cast out of polite society. His realm, the Ash Pit, is a world made entirely of dust, ash and smoke. Malakath is unique because he was once a great Daedric hero named Trinimac, who was swallowed and changed by Boethiah. He is a bitter, angry god who demands strength, loyalty, and bloody oaths from his followers, teaching them to survive in a world that hates them. Namira is the prince of decay and the ancient darkness. Her sphere is the things that crawl on the ground, the insects, the spiders, and the rot that claims all dead things. Her realm, the scuttling void, is a place of absolute darkness and wet, heavy air, filled with the sounds of millions of tiny legs. She is worshipped by cannibals, beggars, and those who find beauty in the most disgusting parts of existence. Finally, we must look at the remaining lords of bargains, life and vice. Clavicus Vile is the prince of bargains and wish fulfillment. He operates from the fields of regret, a deceptively peaceful countryside. Vile is always accompanied by his hound Barbas, who often acts as the voice of reason. Vile loves to grant wishes to mortals, but his deals always contain a hidden trick that leads to the wisher's ruin. He represents the danger of taking the easy path to power. Meridia, the prince of life and light, is a rare example of a Daedra who was once an angel-like spirit of Aetherius. Her realm, the coloured rooms, is a bright world of energy and light. Meridia has a fierce, burning hatred for the undead and any form of necromancy. However, her light is not kind. It is cold, blinding, and demands absolute obedience, stripping mortals of their free will to make them perfect, mindless servants. Sanguine is the prince of debauchery, indulgence, and vice. His sphere is the dark side of celebration, where pleasure becomes an addiction. He rules over the myriad realms of revelry, a collection of pocket dimensions where the party never ends and the wine never runs dry. Sanguine encourages mortals to give in to their basest desires, leading them down a path of self-destruction disguised as joy. Lastly, there is Peryite, the taskmaster and the prince of pestilence. Though he appears as a small dragon, he is often considered the weakest of the princes, though this is a dangerous misunderstanding. His sphere is the natural order, disease, and the organization of Oblivion's lower forces. His realm, the pits, is a dark, flooded wasteland of disease and rot. Peryite acts as the cosmic janitor, using plagues to clear away the weak and maintain the balance of life. These 17 princes are the lords of our nightmares, the architects of our history, and the constant threat to our survival. They cannot be killed, and they cannot be reasoned with for long. They are the eternal rulers of the void, waiting for the barriers of our world to fail so they can claim Nirn as their own. As scholars, we must continue to study them, to watch the skies, and to remember that the lords of Misrule are always listening. Chapter 3. The Legions of Oblivion, Lesser Daedra. To truly understand the dangers that threaten our mortal world, one must look beyond the towering figures of the Daedric Princes. While those dark deities plan the downfall of empires from their distant thrones, it is their infinite armies that march across our borders. These are the Lesser Daedra. They are the soldiers, the beasts, and the elemental forces that make up the vast legions of Oblivion. For a scholar of the Imperial Library, studying these creatures is not merely an academic exercise. It is a vital necessity for the survival of Nirn. Every soldier on the battlefield and every mage in their tower must understand what these entities are, how they fight, and how they can be defeated. At the very core of Daedric metaphysics lies a fundamental truth that separates them from mortals. A Daedra cannot truly die. When a mortal soldier falls in battle, their soul departs for the afterlife, leaving behind a cold corpse. When a Lesser Daedra is slain on Nirn, its physical form is destroyed, but its immortal animus, or spirit, simply slips back across the planar veil. It returns to the chaotic waters of Oblivion to reform, rebuilding its body from the raw, creative energy of the void. This means that when we fight the legions of the Dark Realms, we are fighting an enemy with infinite reinforcements. You can banish a Daedra 1,000 times, but it will always return, harboring a deep and ancient hatred for the mortal world that rejected it. For mortals, the most common way to encounter these entities is through the school of conjuration. Summoning a Daedra is a highly precise and incredibly dangerous art. It is not a matter of creating life, but of carving a temporary pathway through the liminal barrier that protects our world. A conjurer must use their own magicka to project a mental anchor into the chaotic void of Oblivion. Once an entity is located, the mage must force its spirit through the barrier and bind it to a physical shape on Nirn. This binding is a battle of wills. If the summoner's focus wavers for even a single second, the binding will shatter. The summoned Daedra, suddenly freed from mortal control, will almost always turn on its master with terrible fury, seeking to punish the mortal who dared to enslave it. Among all the Lesser Daedra, none are more feared or more organized than the Dremora. They refer to themselves as the kin, a term that translates to the people in their native tongue. Unlike many other chaotic spirits of the void, the Dremora are not wild beasts or mindless forces of nature. They are highly intelligent, deeply disciplined, and fiercely loyal to their clans and their chosen masters. Most commonly, they serve Merinez Dagon, the Prince of Destruction, or Molag Bal, the Harvester of Souls. Though their clans can occasionally be found in the service of other princes, the Dremora view mortals with utter contempt, seeing us as weak, fragile, and temporary creatures who do not deserve to possess the stable beauty of Mundus. The military structure of the Dremora is defined by a rigid caste system. At the absolute bottom of this hierarchy are the churls. These are the common rabble of the Dremora, used as disposable shock troops and manual labourers. They are aggressive, undisciplined and cruel, but they lack the tactical brilliance of their superiors. Above them are the caitiffs and the kinval, who serve as the dependable backbone of the Daedric infantry. These soldiers are heavily armoured, skilled in the use of greatswords and battle axes, and trained to fight in tight, coordinated formations. As you climb higher up the ranks, the threat increases dramatically. The kinreeves and kinmarchers act as officers and field commanders, directing the lower ranks with cold efficiency. Above them are the Markinaz, the Grand Lords who govern entire territories within the Plains of Oblivion. At the absolute pinnacle of their society stands the Valkaneds. These warrior dukes are the personal guard and chief advisors of the Daedric princes themselves. A single Valkaned possesses enough magical and physical power to lay waste to an entire mortal village. In combat, Dremora do not feel fear, because they know they will reform in oblivion if they fall. Their greatest weakness is their extreme pride. They often underestimate mortal opponents, believing that no creature of flesh and bone can truly match their martial honour. When facing the Dremora on the field of battle, a defender must be prepared for a combination of heavy martial prowess and devastating destruction magic. They are masters of heavy armour and flame magic, often imbuing their weapons with fire to burn their enemies from the inside out. To defeat a Dremora, one must exploit their rigid adherence to hierarchy. If you can identify and assassinate the commander of a Dremora squad, the lower-ranking churls and caitiffs will often lose their tactical cohesion, falling back on their wild, aggressive instincts and making them far easier to pick apart. While the Dremora represent the organized military of Oblivion, the elemental Atronachs represent its raw, unbridled power. Atronachs are unique among the lesser Daedra because they do not typically swear allegiance to any Daedric prince. Instead, they inhabit their own pocket realms within the void, existing as pure, sentient manifestations of elemental forces. They are not mindless, despite their lack of spoken language. They possess a deep alien intelligence, and they can be summoned by any mage who knows the correct symbols and incantations. The Flame Atronach is the most common of these elemental servants. It manifests as a floating, slender figure composed of blackened stone and dancing yellow flames. In combat, the Flame Atronach is incredibly agile, hovering above the ground and keeping its distance from melee fighters. It attacks by hurling concentrated bolts of fire and summoning localized firestorms. Because their bodies are made of pure heat, any physical strike against a Flame Atronach carries the risk of burning the attacker. Their primary tactical weakness is cold. A well-placed frost spell can quickly destabilize their fiery core, causing their physical form to shatter. However, a conjurer must be extremely cautious when defeating them, as a dying Flame Atronach will release its remaining energy in a violent, explosive blast of fire. For defensive positions, mages often summon the Frost Atronach. These massive, towering giants are composed entirely of jagged, unmelting ice. Unlike their fiery counterparts, Frost Atronachs are slow and heavy, relying on brute physical force and area of effect frost magic to overwhelm their foes. They act as living shields, using their massive frozen limbs to crush armor and freeze the blood of anyone who gets too close. Their dense, icy bodies make them incredibly resistant to physical weapons, which often slide harmlessly off their frozen skin. To defeat a Frost Atronach, one must use intense heat. Fire spells will quickly melt their joints, slowing their movements even further until their entire structure collapses into a harmless pool of water. The most dangerous of the common elementals is the Storm Atronach. This terrifying entity is a chaotic vortex of levitating rocks held together by a crackling, high-voltage core of lightning. Storm Atronachs are highly aggressive and possess no physical weak points, as their bodies are constantly shifting in the air. They can strike enemies from great distances with chain lightning, or close the gap instantly to unleash devastating electrical discharges. They are completely immune to conventional shock magic, which only serves to recharge their power. Defeating a Storm Atronach requires a coordinated effort, using powerful physical blunt force to shatter the stone bonds of their body, or using banishment spells to force their electrical essence back into the void. Beyond the soldiers and the elementals, The Plains of Oblivion are also home to a terrifying variety of Daedric beasts. These creatures possess animal-like intelligence, but are driven by a malicious hunger that makes them incredibly deadly. The most infamous of these beasts is the Clannfear, resembling a bipedal reptile with a massive bony crest on its head and razor-sharp talons. The Clannfear is the ultimate hunting hound of the Daedric realms. They are extremely fast and hunt in packs, using their incredible speed to run down prey before pinning them to the ground. A Clannfear's primary attack is a devastating headbutt, using its hard, beak-like skull to crack open steel armor. When facing a Clannfear, a soldier must never turn their back. They must use heavy shields to absorb the initial charge and strike at the creature's soft underbelly, which is its only poorly protected area. In the damp, dark corners of Oblivion, one might also encounter the Daedroth. These are hulking, bipedal reptilian brutes that combine the physical strength of a giant with the predatory instincts of a crocodile. The Daedroth is a walking engine of destruction, capable of breathing fire, tearing enemies apart with its massive jaws, and crushing shields with its powerful tail. They are incredibly difficult to bring down due to their thick, scaly hides, which can absorb immense physical punishment. The best defense against a Daedroth is to keep your distance, utilizing powerful ranged magic or heavy siege weapons to wear them down before they can close the distance. There are also the lesser servants, such as the Scamps and the Bannekin. These small, mischievous creatures are often used by apprentice conjurers as simple messengers or distractions. While a single Scamp is rarely a threat to an experienced warrior, they should never be ignored. They are cowardly but highly cruel, and they will quickly swarm a wounded target, using their claws and minor fire spells to inflict painful, festering wounds. One Shabadidulju, as we look upon these varied and terrifying entities, we must remember that they are always watching our world. Every time a mortal mage conjures a flame Atronak to light their hearth, or binds a Dremora to guard a treasure vault, they are weakening the barrier that keeps the legions of the void at bay. The lesser Daedra do not feel pity, they do not feel weariness, and they do not fear death. They are an eternal tide of chaos, waiting for the day when the gates of Oblivion will open once more, and they can finally reclaim the mortal world for their dark masters. Until that day comes, we must remain vigilant, armed with the knowledge of their strengths, their weaknesses, and their eternal hunger. Chapter 4. Children of Akatosh. The Dovah. In the dusty archives of the Imperial Library, we find many records of monsters that threaten the mortal world. We read of blood-drinking vampires, of giant beasts in the deep woods, and of Daedra from the cold wastes of Oblivion. Yet, none of these creatures carry the same weight of terror as the Dovah. We call them dragons in our common tongue, but this simple name does not capture their true nature. They are not animals. They are not even monsters in the usual sense. To understand the dragon, we must look beyond their teeth and scales. We must look at the very fabric of time itself. The dragons are the children of Akatosh, the great dragon god of time. They did not grow from eggs, and they do not have parents in the way mortals do. They were not born, they simply began when time itself began. Because of this, every dragon is a physical piece of the god of time. They do not experience the world as we do. For a mortal, time is a river that flows in one direction, carrying us from birth to death. For a dragon, time is something they stand above. They are eternal. They have always existed, and in their own minds, they will always exist. This eternal nature shapes everything about them, including their physical bodies. When you look at a dragon, you see an enormous beast of scales, horns and wings. Their scales are harder than the finest steel forged by mortal hands. Their teeth can crush iron armor, and their claws can tear through stone walls. But scholars of the Imperial Library have noted that this terrible body is only a temporary shell. It is a physical anchor that allows an immortal spirit to walk upon the earth. The true essence of the dragon is not made of flesh and bone. It is made of pure, unyielding light and power, a spark of the divine creator. Because their true nature is spiritual, Dragons do not need to eat, sleep, or breathe to survive. They do not feel hunger as we know it, nor do they grow weak with age. A dragon that has slept under the dirt for thousands of years is just as strong as one that flew through the skies yesterday. When they consume prey, it is not to feed their bodies, but to satisfy a deeper, more spiritual hunger. It is an act of dominance, a way to show that they are the absolute masters of the living world. This brings us to the most dangerous aspect of the dragon, their voice. Mortals use words to share ideas, to tell stories, or to ask questions. For the Dovah, speaking is an act of creation and destruction. Their language is called the Thuam, or the voice. When a dragon speaks, they do not just make sounds, they project their very soul into the world to change reality. If a dragon wishes to burn a village, they do not need to spark a fire with flint and steel. They speak the words for fire, force, and sun. To understand the Thuam, we must understand that to a dragon, speaking is arguing. When two dragons fight, they are not just clawing at each other, they are having a debate. Each shout is an argument, a statement of truth. When a dragon shouts the words for fire, they are arguing that the air in front of them should be a burning inferno, because their souls are so powerful. Reality itself yields to their argument. The air becomes fire because the dragon said it must be so. For a mortal to stand against the voice is to stand against the laws of nature. This reality-warping language makes them nearly impossible to defeat in battle. A single dragon can destroy an entire army, not because they are physically strong, but because they can change the rules of the world around them. They can call down storms from a clear sky, freeze the blood in a soldier's veins, or force the earth to shake. To fight a dragon is to fight the world itself, as the very air and ground become weapons in the dragon's hands. Despite this terrifying power, mortals have found ways to fight back. Throughout history, brave heroes have used great weapons and powerful magic to bring these beasts down. Yet, these victories were always temporary. This is the dark secret that kept the scholars of the past in constant fear. You cannot truly kill a dragon with ordinary weapons. You can break their wings, pierce their hearts, and tear their flesh until they stop moving. Their physical bodies will rot, leaving nothing but giant bones in the dirt. But the dragon is not dead. When a mortal slays a dragon, they only destroy the physical shell. The dragon's soul remains inside the bones, trapped in a deep sleep. The soul cannot leave this world, and it cannot go to any afterlife. It simply waits. It waits for another dragon, one with greater power, to call it back to life. Alduin, the World Eater and the firstborn of Akatosh, holds the power to wake his fallen brothers. With a specific shout, he can rebuild their flesh and bring them back to the skies, as if they had never fallen. The victories of mortal heroes are but a brief pause in an endless cycle. There is only one exception to this rule. There is only one being who can truly end a dragon's existence, the Dragonborn, or Dovahkin in the dragon language. The Dragonborn is a rare mortal who possesses the body of a human or elf, but the soul of a dragon. This unique nature gives them a power that no ordinary warrior can ever hope to match. When a Dragonborn defeats a dragon in battle, something extraordinary and terrifying happens. As the dragon's physical body dies, its soul is not left to sleep in its bones. Instead, the Dragonborn's soul reaches out and pulls the dragon's soul inward. The sky glows with a strange golden light, and the physical flesh of the dragon burns away into ash, leaving only a skeleton. The dragon's soul, its memories, its power, and its knowledge of the Thuam are all absorbed by the Dragonborn. In that moment, the dragon is truly dead. Its spirit has been consumed, made a part of another being. For a dragon, this is the ultimate horror. To be defeated by another dragon is shameful, but to have your soul devoured by a mortal who carries the blood of Akatosh is a complete end. That dragon can never be brought back to life. Even Alduin himself cannot resurrect a dragon whose soul has been consumed. The chain of immortality is broken, and the shard of time that was the dragon is gone forever, lost inside the soul of the Dragonborn. This is why the legends of the Dragonborn are so important to the history of Tamriel. Without them, the dragons would be an endless plague, a threat that could never be stopped. Every dragon slain by a regular soldier is just a problem delayed for future generations. Only the Dovahkiin can clean the skies and ensure that the beasts do not return. The relationship between the Dragonborn and the Dovah is one of predator and prey, but on a cosmic level. As we look back at the history of the Dragon War and the return of these beasts in the Fourth Era, we must feel a sense of solemn dread. The dragons do not hate mortals, they simply view us the way we view insects. To a dragon, the natural order of the world is for the strong to rule and the weak to serve. Their very name for themselves, Dovah, is connected to the concept of dominance. They cannot understand peace, compromise, or equality. To exist is to conquer. We must study these creatures, not just to find ways to defeat them, but to understand the fragile nature of our own existence. They are reminders of a time when the world was young, wild, and ruled by forces far greater than any king or emperor. The bones that lie buried across the hills of Skyrim and other parts of Tamriel are not mere fossils. They are sleeping gods, waiting for a voice to wake them or a hero to consume them. Until the last dragon soul is taken, the threat of the Dovah will always hang over the world of mortals, a dark shadow from the dawn of time. Chapter 5. The Dragon War, Tyranny and Downfall. To understand the dark era of the Dragon War, we must first look back to a time before history was recorded in books, to the ancient days of the Merethic era. In this distant past, the ancestors of the Nords, known as the Atmarans, sailed across the freezing waters of the Sea of Ghosts from their homeland of Atmara. They settled in the northern, snowy mountains of Tamriel, a land we now call Skyrim. These early humans brought with them a deep reverence for the natural world and the spiritual forces within it. Instead of worshipping distant, unseen gods, they practiced a form of totem worship. They saw the divine in the beasts of the earth and sky. They carved stone monuments to the hawk, the wolf, the snake, and the bear. But above all other creatures, they feared and revered the dragon. To the ancient Atmarans, the dragon was not merely a beast of prey, but the supreme representation of time and power. They called them the Dovah. These massive, scaled creatures did not have to earn their place as gods in the eyes of men. They possessed a natural majesty, an immortal lifespan, and the ability to speak in a tongue that could reshape reality itself. Every word a dragon spoke was a shout of power, a magical force that could summon storms, breathe fire, or bend the minds of lesser beings. For a primitive human struggling to survive in a harsh and frozen wilderness, a dragon was the closest thing to a living god they would ever encounter. It was only natural that this intense reverence eventually organized into a powerful religious order. This order became known as the Dragon Cult. At the apex of this hierarchy was Alduin, the firstborn of Akatosh. In the ancient myths, Alduin was destined to be the World Eater, a cosmic force that would one day consume the world so that a new one could be born. But Alduin possessed a fatal flaw that would change the destiny of Nirn forever. He grew proud, he looked upon the mortal races and decided that instead of waiting to destroy the world, he wished to rule over it as an absolute king. He abandoned his sacred duty as the World Eater and chose instead to conquer. Under his leadership, the dragons claimed dominion over the land, and the dragon cult became their primary tool of control. In the beginning, the rule of the dragon cult was not entirely cruel. The dragons themselves did not wish to be bothered with the daily tasks of governing mortal cities or collecting taxes. To bridge the gap between the divine dragons and the common people, they appointed certain humans as high priests. These chosen men were granted incredible magical power and were gifted with masks made of precious metals and strange otherworldly stones. These masks, forged with ancient draconic magic, granted their wearers supernatural strength, endless magical energy, and even the secret to extending their lives far beyond normal human limits. In exchange for this power, the dragon priests served as the rulers of mankind. enforcing the laws of the dragons and keeping the peace. For many years this arrangement worked. The early Nords built grand stone cities, such as Bromjunar, which served as the capital of the dragon cult. They paid their tributes, offered their prayers, and lived in relative peace. But as the centuries passed, the absolute power of the dragon priests began to corrupt them. They grew arrogant and increasingly detached from the people they were meant to guide. The priests began to demand heavier tributes, forcing the population into harsh labor to build massive temples and tomb complexes. Those who questioned the authority of the priests were met with swift and brutal punishment. The benevolence of the early cult faded, replaced by an iron-fisted tyranny. The dragon priests, seeking to secure their own power and please their draconic masters, began to demand blood sacrifices. They ruled through fear, treating their fellow humans as nothing more than cattle and slaves. The dragons themselves became more aggressive, flying over human settlements to demand absolute obedience and burning any village that dared to show even a hint of independence. The lives of mortals became a waking nightmare of endless labor, terror, and grief. The cries of the suffering Nords rose from the snowy valleys of Skyrim, reaching even the heavens. It was during this dark period of despair that the goddess Kine, whom the Nords revered as the mother of men, looked down upon Nirn with pity. She saw that humanity was completely helpless against their tormentors. Mortals had no weapons that could pierce the iron scales of the Dovah, and they had no way to counter the devastating power of the Thuchm, the dragon voice. Kine knew that if men were to survive, they needed to be able to fight back on equal terms. She intervened, reaching out to one of Alduin's most powerful lieutenants, a dragon named Paarthurnax. Paarthurnax had long grown weary of his brother Alduin's arrogance and the cruelty of the dragon cult. He believed that Alduin had committed a great blasphemy by claiming the status of a god and enslaving mortals. Prompted by Kine, Paarthurnax made a fateful decision to betray his own kind. He turned his back on Alduin and secretively aligned himself with the suffering humans. He knew that the only way mortals could ever hope to defeat a dragon was by using the power of the dragon's own tongue. Gathering a small group of brave Nord rebels on the highest peak of Skyrim, the throat of the world, Paarthurnax began to teach them the secrets of the Thu'um. He taught them how to focus their vital energy into words of power, showing them how to breathe fire, summon frost, and project their inner strength through their voices. This was a difficult and dangerous process, as the draconic language is inherently tied to the concepts of dominance and reality. For a mortal to speak even a single word of the Thu'um required years of intense mental and physical discipline. Yet, driven by desperation and a desire for freedom, these first mortal students persevered. They became known as the Tongues. Among these first tongues were 3 legendary heroes, whose names would be remembered for thousands of years: Hakon One-Eye, Gormlaith Golden Hilt, and Feldir the Old. Under the guidance of Paarthurnax, they mastered the voice and began to teach it to other rebels. With this new godlike weapon in their possession, the Nords finally had the means to stand against their oppressors. The spark of rebellion was ignited, and the Dragon War began. The war was a long, bloody, and devastating conflict that tore Skyrim apart. It was not a simple rebellion of peasants against soldiers. It was a cosmic struggle between mortals wielding the power of gods and the actual dragons who claimed to be gods. Great stone cities were reduced to ash as dragons rained fire from the skies, while below, legions of mortal rebels clashed with the fanatical armies of the dragon cult. The dragon priests unleashed their terrible magic, summoning undead thralls and casting devastating spells. But the rebel Nords fought with the ferocity of those who had nothing left to lose. As the war dragged on, the mortal tongues realized that even with the power of the Thu'um, they faced a fundamental problem. A dragon is an immortal shard of time. Even if a dragon's physical body is defeated in battle, its soul remains intact, waiting to be resurrected by another dragon. Furthermore, the sheer majesty and terrifying presence of a dragon in flight made it incredibly difficult for mortal warriors to fight them on the ground. To truly win the war, the rebels needed a weapon that could strike at the very essence of what made a dragon immortal. The three heroes, Harkon, Gormlaith and Feldir, did something that had never been done before. They used their deep understanding of mortal suffering and their hatred for their oppressors to create a completely new shout. They called it Dragonrend, unlike the shouts taught to them by Paarthurnax, which were based on the ancient concepts of the dragons. Dragonrend was born entirely from the mortal mind. It was a shout of pure, unfiltered mortality. When forced into the mind of a dragon, it compelled the immortal beast to experience the concept of death, limitation, and temporary existence. This experience was so alien and terrifying to a dragon that it literally forced them out of the sky, rendering them unable to fly and leaving them vulnerable to mortal weapons. With the creation of Dragonrend, the tide of the war began to turn. The rebel forces marched on the strongholds of the dragon cult, casting down the high priests and slaying the dragons that defended them. One by one, the great temples fell, and the power of the cult was shattered. But the war could not truly end while Alduin still ruled. The World Eater remained the ultimate threat, a force of nature that no mortal army could hope to contain forever. The climax of the Dragon War took place on the snowy peak of the Throat of the World. Harkon, Gormlaith and Feldir confronted Alduin in a final, desperate battle. Using the Dragonrend shout, they managed to bring the massive black dragon down to the earth, where they engaged him in close combat. Gormlaith fought with legendary bravery, but was ultimately struck down by the World Eater. Harkon and Feldir fought on, but they quickly realized a terrible truth. Even with the power of Dragonrend, and even with Alduin forced to the ground, they could not kill him. His power was too vast, and his connection to the flow of time was too strong to be severed by mortal blades. In that moment of absolute desperation, Feldir the Old drew forth an artifact of unspeakable power that he had brought with him to the mountain, an Elder Scroll. Feldir knew that using such an object was incredibly dangerous, as the scrolls exist outside of time and can drive a mortal mad or blind them. But with no other options left, and with Alduin preparing to destroy them all, Feldir opened the scroll. He did not use it to kill Alduin, for that was impossible. Instead, he used the reality-bending power of the Elder Scroll to rip Alduin from the current moment and cast him forward, far into the future, effectively banishing him from the timeline entirely. With their leader gone, the remaining dragons lost their unity and their will to fight. Many were hunted down and slain by the victorious Nords, while others fled to the remote corners of the world to hide. The dragon cult collapsed into ruin. The surviving priests withdrew to their hidden tombs, sealing themselves inside with their remaining followers, waiting for the day when Alduin would return to reclaim his throne. The Dragon War had ended, and humanity was finally free, but the victory came at a terrible cost. The land of Skyrim was scarred. Its ancient cities were in ruins, and the memory of the terror they had endured would linger in the hearts of the Nords for generations. The banishment of Alduin was not a permanent solution, but a delay of the inevitable. The World Eater had not been destroyed. He had simply been cast into the currents of time, waiting for the moment when he would emerge once more to fulfill his ancient destructive destiny. Chapter 6. The Curse of Hircine, Lycanthropy in Tamriel. The wilderness of Tamriel is a place of beauty, but to the scholar it is also a place of deep, ancient dread. Far beyond the safety of city walls, the natural order is constantly threatened by forces from the Oblivion planes. While the divines gave shape to the world, the Daedric Princes are always trying to change it, to twist it, and to claim it for their own. Among these powerful entities, none is quite as active in the wild spaces of Nirn as Hircine, the Lord of the Hunt. He does not seek to conquer Tamriel with massive armies or dark magic. Instead, he seeks to turn mortals into the ultimate predators, to make them part of his great game. This is the origin of lycanthropy, a terrifying condition that is far more than a simple illness. It is a physical and spiritual reshaping of mortal life, a curse that binds a soul to the wild forever. To understand lycanthropy, we must first look at the Daedric prince who created it. Hircine is known by many names, including the huntsman and the father of man-beasts. Unlike other princes who represent pure destruction or lies, Hircine represents the primal laws of nature, the chase, the tension between the hunter and the prey, and the survival of the fittest. He believes in a fair game, always giving his prey a small chance to escape or fight back. However, his version of nature is brutal and bloody. When he looks at the mortal races, he sees beings that are weak, soft, and limited by their fear. To correct this, he created the beast blood, a magical infection that allows a mortal to shed their weak skin and take on the form of a ferocious, powerful beast. This curse is known to scholars by different names depending on the strain, but the two most common are Canis lupinus and Canis hysteria. These terms are often used to describe the disease that starts the change. Transmission in the wild usually happens through a violent encounter. If a traveller is lucky enough to survive an attack by a werewolf or a werebear, they may find that their wounds do not heal normally. The claws and teeth of these creatures carry the active essence of Hircine's curse. Once the disease enters the bloodstream, the mortal has a short window of time to act. For 3 days, the infection behaves much like a common fever. During this critical incubation period, simple cure disease potions or blessings at a holy altar can easily wipe the infection from the body. But if 3 days pass without treatment, the disease takes root in the very soul of the victim, and the transition becomes permanent. There is also a much faster, more intense way to receive the curse. By directly drinking the blood of an active lycanthrope, this method bypasses the 3-day waiting period entirely. It is a deliberate choice, often used by tight-knit groups or cults who worship Hircine. When a mortal drinks this blood, the magical reaction is instant. The first transformation begins within minutes, and it is described in historical records as an incredibly painful, chaotic experience. The sudden rush of power and feral energy is so overwhelming that the newly turned beast often suffers from total memory loss, waking up hours later with no memory of the violence they committed. The physical mechanics of the transformation are a nightmare of biology. When the transformation begins, the mortal body is violently dismantled and rebuilt from the inside out. Bones snap and lengthen, reforming into animal shapes. The human spine stretches, the ribcage expands to accommodate massive lungs and a larger heart, and the skull elongates into a muzzle. Muscles tear and regrow at an impossible speed, packing on immense density and power. Fur erupts from the skin, and fingernails harden into razor-sharp claws. This process is not painless. It is an agonizing experience where the mortal must feel their entire skeletal structure break and reform. Yet, the extreme rush of adrenaline and the flood of Daedric energy dulls the pain, replacing it with a wild, intoxicating sense of strength and speed. Once the transformation is complete, the creature is a perfect killing machine. In beast form, a lycanthrope possesses physical strength that far exceeds any natural animal or mortal warrior. They can run faster than horses, leap incredible distances, and shrug off wounds that would easily kill a normal person. Their senses are heightened to an extreme degree. They can smell the fear of their prey from miles away and track a target through pitch-black darkness. However, this power comes at a terrible price. The mind of the mortal is pushed into a dark corner, replaced by a raging, feral instinct. The beast is driven by a constant, painful bloodlust. It does not hunt out of hunger, but out of a deep spiritual need to kill. If this bloodlust is not satisfied, the beast becomes increasingly wild, eventually losing all control and turning on anyone nearby, including friends and family. But the physical change is only half of the curse. The spiritual mechanics are even more complex and far-reaching. When a mortal contracts lycanthropy, their soul is fundamentally altered. It is no longer a pure mortal soul. Instead, it is split, bound to the spirit of the beast, and through it to Hircine himself. This spiritual change is so deep that it even affects the magic of soul trapping. Scholars and mages have noted that when a werewolf or werebear is killed, their soul does not always behave like a normal human or elven soul. In some cases, their soul can be trapped in common white soul gems, which are normally reserved for animals and lesser creatures. This suggests that Hircine's curse actually degrades the spiritual identity of the mortal, pulling them down to the level of a wild beast in the eyes of cosmic magic. This spiritual bond becomes most tragic after death. For most mortals, death means their soul travels to the Aetherius, the realm of the divines, where they can find peace in afterlives like Sovngarde or the sands behind the stars. But for the lycanthrope, this path is closed, because their soul is bound to Hircine, the Daedric prince claims them upon their death, regardless of who they worshipped in life. Their soul is pulled into Hircine's personal realm of oblivion, known as the Hunting Grounds. This realm is a vast, endless wilderness of dense forests, dark swamps, and steep mountains. It is a place of eternal hunting. Those who embraced the beast blood spend eternity chasing prey through the forests, while those who fought against the curse are hunted by Hircine's loyal hounds. It is a cycle of violence that never ends, an eternal trap where the soul is never allowed to rest. While the werewolf is the most famous variety of lycanthrope, Hircine's curse takes many different forms across the different provinces of Tamriel. In the cold, snowy forests of Skyrim and the island of Solstheim, the werebear is a common and terrifying sight. Werebears are even larger and more aggressive than werewolves. They possess thick, heavy fur and massive claws that can crush armor with a single blow. Unlike werewolves, who often form packs to hunt together, werebears are usually solitary and highly territorial. They guard their territories with extreme violence, attacking anyone who dares to enter. In other parts of the continent, legends speak of even stranger beasts. In the hot deserts of Elsewhere, there are rumors of werelines. In the deep swamps of Black Marsh, travelers whisper of were-crocodiles that drag their prey into the dark waters. In the dense jungles of Valenwood, there are tales of werebats that hunt from the skies. All of these creatures are different branches of the same Daedric tree, each designed by Hircine to be the ultimate predator of their specific environment. For those who wish to escape this fate, finding a cure is one of the most difficult and dangerous tasks in Tamriel. Once the 3-day infection period has passed, normal medicine and common prayers are completely useless. The curse is too deeply rooted in the soul. To break the bond, one must seek out ancient, dark magic. Historically, the most reliable source of a cure lies with the Glenmoral Witches, a coven of Hagravans and witches who worship Hircine. They hold the secrets to both the creation and the destruction of the beast blood. However, their help always comes with a heavy price. To cure the curse, a ritual must be performed using the severed head of a Glenmoral worm, a powerful magical creature. The head must be burned in a sacred fire, which coaxes the beast spirit out of the victim's soul. Once the spirit materializes in the physical world, the victim must fight and kill their own inner beast. Only by defeating this physical manifestation of the curse can the spiritual bond to Hircine be broken, freeing the mortal's soul. Lycanthropy is not just a disease of the body, but a war for the soul. It offers unmatched physical power, the thrill of the hunt, and a life free from the rules of civilization. But it demands everything in return: your sanity, your humanity, and your eternal rest. To the scholars of the Imperial Library, the man-beasts of Tamriel are a tragic reminder of the power of the Daedra. They are living weapons, created by a prince who views the mortal world as nothing more than a private hunting ground, where everyone is either a hunter or the prey. Chapter 7. The Night's Children, Vampires and the Blood Matron. Deep within the archives of the Imperial Library, there are records that the public is never meant to see. Among these, the scrolls detailing the origins of vampirism are perhaps the most chilling. To the common folk of Tamriel, a vampire is simply a monster of the night, a beast that hungers for blood. But to the chroniclers of the Empire, vampirism is understood as something far more terrible. It is not a simple disease of the flesh, it is a profound metaphysical corruption of the soul, a direct wound inflicted upon the natural order of Nirn by the Daedric Prince of Domination, Molag Bal. To understand the threat of the vampire, we must travel back to a time before written history, when Tamriel was still young. In those ancient days there lived a Nedic woman named Lamar Beolfag. She was a virgin priestess devoted to Arche, the Daedra who governs the cycle of life and death. Her devotion was pure, and her life was peaceful. But her piety caught the attention of Molag Bal. The Daedric prince detested Arche, and hated the peaceful transition of souls from the mortal world to the afterlife. To mock Arche, and prove his own dominance, Molag Bal descended upon Nirn and brutally defiled Lamar. When the Daedric prince departed, he left the broken priestess on the cold ground. To seal his curse, he pressed a single droplet of his own dark blood onto her forehead. Lame did not die immediately. She was found by a tribe of nomadic Needers who took pity on her and tried to nurse her back to health. For days, she lay in a deep coma, her body fighting the corruption that ran through her veins. The nomads watched over her, but as her body began to change, they grew terrified. Her wounds healed too quickly, and a strange, cold deathliness settled over her skin. Believing she had passed away, or perhaps fearing what she was becoming, the nomads built a great funeral pyre to cremate her body. As the flames began to rise, the true horror of Molag Bal's curse was revealed. Lamé did not burn. Instead, she awoke from her sleep with a violent, unnatural hunger. The transformation was complete. She had become the world's very first vampire, the Blood Matron. Overcome by a madness she could not control, she fell upon the nomads who had tried to save her. She tore open the throats of the women, blinded the children, and defiled the men in a terrible mirror of the violence she had suffered. When the slaughter was finished, Lamé looked upon her actions with horror and rage. She realized that Arche, the god she had served so faithfully, had abandoned her in her darkest hour. In her anger, she tore off her sacred amulets and cursed both Arche and her creator, Molag Bal. She swore that she would not be a mere puppet for the Daedric prince, nor would she respect the natural cycle of life and death. She would survive, and she would spread her curse to show the gods that her new children could grow stronger than the poison that created them. Lamé's unique strain of vampirism is known to scholars as noxophilic sanguivoria. Unlike the vampires of later eras, those who carry the Blood Matron's direct lineage do not burn in the sunlight, though they still dislike its brightness. Instead, they are tremendously strengthened by the night, drawing immense power from the darkness. Through her, the curse spread across the provinces, mutating over centuries into many different bloodlines, each adapted to the land it infected. In the frozen northern province of Skyrim, the curse took a particularly dark and ancient form. Here, the dominant strain is Sanguinar Vampiris, and its masters are the Volkihar clan. This bloodline is led by Lord Harkon, a powerful monarch who made his own pact with Molag Bal in exchange for immortality. The Volkihar are unique in their ability to navigate the frozen wastes. Legend says they can reach through the ice of frozen lakes to pull their victims down into the freezing water without breaking the surface. Those of the purest Volkihar blood possess the terrifying ability to transform into vampire lords. In this form, they become towering, winged beasts with leathery skin, capable of levitating, summoning gargoyles, and draining the life force of their enemies from a distance. Unlike the followers of Lamé, the Volkihar often embrace the dark will of Molag Bal, seeking to bring about a prophecy known as the Tyranny of the Sun, which would shroud Nirn in eternal darkness. To the south, in the heartland of Cyrodiil, the vampires have taken a completely different path. The Cyrodiil Vampirim Order is perhaps the most politically dangerous bloodline in all of Tamriel. Rather than living in ruins or wild caves, these vampires have integrated themselves into high society. They are cultured, wealthy, and deeply influential. They feed on the sleeping and the vulnerable, but they maintain a strict code of secrecy to protect their identities. The Cyrodiil Order owes its success to a pact made with Clavicus Vile, the Daedric Prince of Bargains. Through this arrangement, they are able to blend in with mortals almost perfectly, provided they remain well fed. If a Cyrodiil vampire goes without blood, their skin shrivels, and their monstrous nature becomes visible to all. Because of this, they move through the courts of the imperial city like ghosts, whispering in the ears of nobles and shaping the destiny of the empire from the shadows. Eastward, in the volcanic wastes of Morrowind, the ash and sulphur have bred three highly distinct and competitive clans. The Dunmer people despise the undead, meaning these clans must live in constant hiding within abandoned Daedric ruins and ancient Dunmer strongholds. The first of these is the Undead clan, composed of powerful spellcasters who use magic and hypnosis to subdue their prey before feeding. The second is the Burn clan, masters of stealth and assassination who move invisible through the ash storms to strike their victims. Finally, there is the Quara clan, known as the most savage and violent of the three. The Quara do not care for subtlety or magic. They rely on brute strength and attack in a state of ecstatic frenzy, tearing their victims apart. The provinces of High Rock and Hammerfell, surrounding the Iliac Bay, are home to at least 9 different vampire families. Each of these clans possesses unique gifts. The Vrazeth clan, for instance, has the ability to leap incredible distances and move with unnatural speed. The Hurrilu are masters of illusion, capable of vanishing from sight at will. The Thrafi clan can heal their wounds almost instantly by absorbing the vitality of those they touch. These clans fight a quiet, endless war against one another for territory and feeding grounds, keeping their existence hidden from the nightly orders of the region. In the deep swamps of Black Marsh, the Wetfang vampires have adapted to the humid, dangerous environment. They are known for their terrifying cruelty and magical skill. Rather than killing their victims or feeding on them directly, the Wetfangs use illusion magic and powerful narcotics to place their captives into a permanent, dreamless coma. They keep these victims alive in hidden underground chambers, using them as living blood fountains to sustain the clan for decades. In the vast forests of Velenwood, the Kirilth bloodline has mastered the wild magic of the Bosmer. These vampires have the unique ability to dissolve their physical bodies into a thick, dark mist. This allows them to travel effortlessly through the dense forest canopy and escape any hunters who attempt to track them. Even the deserts of Elsewhere are not safe from the touch of the Blood Matron. The Tenerad Zalviat clan of the Kajiat has a complicated history. Some of these feline vampires seek to live in peace, guarding the graves of their ancestors and feeding only on those who offer their blood willingly. Others, however, succumb to the feral hunger, hunting travelers along the desert roads and leaving drained corpses in the sand. As scholars of the Imperial Library, we must view these entities not merely as monsters to be slain, but as a spreading plague that threatens the very fabric of Nirn. Each bloodline, from the proud Volkihar to the hidden Cyrodiil Order, represents a different branch of a single, poisoned tree. They are a constant reminder of the day Molag Bal violated the laws of life and death, creating a race of immortal hunters who walk among us, forever hungry, forever waiting in the dark. Chapter 8. The Undead Hordes, Necromancy and Draugr. To understand the dark forces that plague the tombs and battlefields of Tamriel, we must first look at the essence of life itself. In the academic circles of the Imperial Library, necromancy is not viewed merely as the raising of bones and flesh. It is defined as the direct manipulation of the soul. Every mortal creature possesses a spiritual energy, an animus, which is bound to a physical form during life. When death occurs, this bond is meant to sever naturally under the watchful gaze of Arche, allowing the soul to journey to its rightful afterlife in Aetherius. Yet, a necromancer disrupts this sacred cycle. By using dark spells, a practitioner of the black arts can forcibly bind a soul back into a dead physical vessel. Sometimes they use the corpse's original spirit, trapping the deceased person within their own decaying flesh, forcing them to watch in horror as their limbs obey another master. Other times, they pull random stray spirits from the void, or even summon minor Daedra to possess the bones, creating a mindless puppet. The cost of such magic is terrible, not just for the living, but for the cosmic order. When a necromancer uses a black soul gem to power their spells, they are not just using a battery, they are condemning a mortal soul to the soul cairn, a cold, desolate realm of oblivion ruled by the mysterious ideal masters. In this twilight waste, the trapped spirits wander for eternity, slowly losing their memories and their minds. It is this absolute disregard for the natural transition of death that makes necromancy the most feared and hated school of magic across nearly every province of the continent. However, there is one culture where the line between holy devotion and dark magic is notoriously thin. In the ash-choked land of Morrowind, the Dunmer people fiercely condemn necromancy. To a dark elf, the manipulation of a mortal soul for selfish gain is an unspeakable crime, punishable by death. Yet, if you walk through the volcanic hills of Vardenfell, you will find hundreds of ancestral tombs, and almost every single one is heavily guarded by the undead. To the outside world, this looks like blatant hypocrisy, but to the Dunmer, it is a sacred duty. They do not call it necromancy, they call it ancestor worship. The Dunmer believe that the spirits of their family members have a duty to protect the living clan. Many ancestral spirits choose to remain behind willingly, lingering near their family shrines to offer advice, blessings and protection to their descendants. But not all spirits in these tombs are there by choice. When a Dunmer commits a terrible crime or brings shame to their family, they are given a grim punishment after death. Their spirit is forcibly bound to the tomb as a mindless guardian. These wayward ancestors are often twisted into horrifying creatures known as bone walkers and bone lords. A bone walker is a grotesque sight. Their dead flesh is violently reshaped, and their minds are driven completely mad by the binding rituals. They are ritually programmed to never harm members of their own clan, but they are incredibly hostile to outsiders. They drag themselves through the dark corridors of the tombs, carrying terrible curses that drain the strength and endurance of any tomb robber who dares to enter. The more powerful bone lords, often possessing multiple arms, rule over these tombs, serving as a final, terrifying line of defense, while the Dunmer view this as a justified punishment and a vital service to the family. To any imperial scholar, it remains a highly specialized and deeply disturbing form of soul manipulation. If we travel far to the frozen north, we find a completely different kind of eternal guardian. In the snowy mountains of Skyrim, the ancient Nordic ruins are filled with the walking dead known as Draugr. For centuries, travelers believed these creatures were simply the victims of a curse, or mindless zombies raised by rogue wizards. However, careful study of their behavior reveals a far more complex and tragic reality. The Draugr were once living Nords who served the ancient dragon cult thousands of years ago during the Merethic era. They worshipped the dragons as gods, and they served the dragon priests, the powerful mages who ruled over Skyrim with an iron fist. When these priests died, their followers were buried with them in massive stone barrows. Through a dark covenant, these followers were granted a form of incomplete immortality, becoming the Draugr. According to the famous journal of Bernadette Lanier, an imperial scholar who lived among these creatures, the Draugr are not entirely mindless. They have a highly specific, eternal routine that they perform within their tombs. Every day, a small group of Draugr will rise from their stone coffins. They do not immediately look for flesh to consume. Instead, they carry out domestic chores to maintain the tomb. They sweep the dust from the stone floors, wipe down the walls, and light the candles and fire pits to keep the darkness at bay. Once their cleaning is complete, the Draugr gather around the main burial chamber of their master, the dragon priest. There, they kneel and perform a quiet, solemn ritual. Through this ritual, the Draugr transfer a portion of their own residual life energy into the sarcophagus of the priest. This constant flow of life force is what keeps the dragon priest alive, or rather, preserved in a state of suspended animation, allowing them to retain their immense magical power through the centuries. Once the energy transfer is complete, the exhausted Draugr return to their stone alcoves and lie down to sleep. While they rest, their bodies slowly absorb a small amount of magic from the tomb itself, recharging their energy over several days. Meanwhile, another group of Draugr wakes up to take their place, continuing the cycle. This endless rotation of service has kept the ancient ruins of Skyrim active and dangerous for over 4,000 years. The Draugr only become violent when their tombs are disturbed. To them, any living adventurer is a grave robber and an enemy of their sacred order. They will fight with a terrifying, cold fury, using ancient weapons and sometimes even the power of the Thuum, the voice, which they learnt during the height of the dragon cult. When they kill an intruder, they do not leave the body to rot. They embalm the corpse and place it in the tomb, sometimes taking their belongings to add to the hoard of treasure they protect. What makes the Draugr truly tragic is that they are prisoners of their own ancient vows. They cannot leave their tombs, and they cannot truly die unless their physical bodies are completely destroyed. They are bound to a dead faith, serving masters who have long been forgotten by the modern world. Whether we look at the terrified, cursed spirits of the Dunmer tombs, or the dutiful, silent servants of Skyrim's icy barrows, we see the same fundamental truth. The undead are not just monsters to be slain. They are the physical evidence of humanity's desperate, often foolish attempts to conquer death. Through the dark arts of necromancy and soul manipulation, mortals have built eternal prisons for themselves, turning their resting places into zones of endless dread. As long as these ruins stand, the echoes of the past will continue to haunt the present, reminding all of Tamriel that some vows are far too strong for even death to break. Chapter 9. Beasts of the Wilds. Trolls, Spriggans and Giants. The civilized peoples of Tamriel often look to the skies with dread, fearing the return of dragons or the opening of portals to oblivion. We build high stone walls around our cities, and pray to the divines to keep the extraplanar terrors at bay. Yet, we frequently forget that the true masters of Nirn are not the kings in their castles, nor are they the princes of the void. The deepest, most enduring dangers are those that have walked this earth since the dawn of time itself. In the deep forests, upon the frozen peaks, and across the windy plains, the ancient beasts of the wilderness watch us. They do not care for empires or laws. They care only for their territory, and they guard it with a terrifying, primal fury. Among these terrestrial threats, few are as universally feared by common travellers as the troll. These large, ape-like creatures are a common plague across nearly every province of Tamriel. They are easily recognized by their 3 beady black eyes, their heavy muscular arms, and their thick hides. Trolls are not highly intelligent, but what they lack in mind, they more than make up for in pure, brutal strength. They are relentless predators, driven by a constant hunger that forces them to hunt anything that moves, from small forest animals to fully armored soldiers. What makes the troll a truly horrifying opponent is its unnatural ability to heal. A troll can suffer wounds that would instantly kill any mortal man, only to have its flesh knit back together in a matter of seconds. If you slice open a troll's chest, the skin will close before your sword can strike again. This rapid regeneration makes them almost immune to standard physical attacks. An inexperienced warrior might swing their blade until they are exhausted, only to watch the beast stand completely unharmed. However, scholars and experienced hunters know that every creature of Nirn has a weakness. For the troll, that weakness is fire. Flame is the only reliable tool for slaying a troll. When fire touches the beast's greasy fur and thick hide, it does more than just cause pain. The extreme heat cauterizes the wounds, burning away the cells and completely stopping the creature's ability to regenerate. A simple torch, a flaming arrow, or a basic fire spell can turn a hopeless battle into a decisive victory. Without fire, a single troll can slaughter an entire patrol of guards. With it, Even a novice adventurer has a chance to survive. Trolls have adapted to almost every climate on the continent, leading to several distinct subspecies. In the warm forests of Cyrodiil and High Rock, the standard green forest trolls hide in caves and dense canopies. In the swampy marshes of Black Marsh, swamp trolls use the murky water to ambush their prey. Perhaps the most dangerous of all is the frost troll, found on the highest, coldest peaks of Skyrim. Covered in thick white fur, these beasts are larger and much stronger than their southern cousins. Their white coats allow them to blend perfectly into the blinding snow, making them nearly invisible until they are close enough to strike. Despite the great danger they pose, mortals have long tried to exploit trolls for their own gain. Their thick, greasy fat is highly sought after by alchemists for its potent healing properties, while their distinct three-eyed skulls are prized as trophies by wealthy hunters. Some factions, like the ancient Order of the Dawn Guard, have even attempted to capture and train these beasts, fitting them with heavy iron armor to turn their savage strength against the forces of darkness. Yet, a trained troll is still a wild beast at heart, always waiting for a moment of weakness to turn on its master. While trolls are beasts of hunger, there are other creatures that act as the literal guardians of the land. These are the Spriggans, the spirits of the forest. To look upon a Spriggan is to look upon nature itself given physical form. They appear as slender, feminine humanoids made entirely of living wood, roots and vines. Glowing green or orange light shines through the cracks in their wooden skin, and their eyes burn with a cold, protective intelligence. Scholars believe that Spriggans are deeply connected to Kine, the goddess of storm and nature, serving as her eyes and hands in the wild places of the world. Spriggans are intensely territorial. They do not hunt for food, but they will attack anyone who threatens the balance of their forest. They often hide in plain sight, blending perfectly with the surrounding trees. A traveller might walk through a quiet grove, completely unaware of any danger, until the bark of a nearby tree begins to shift and peel away. Within moments, the Spriggan steps forward, ready to strike down the intruder. They view any act of lumberjacking, hunting or harvesting as a declaration of war. In battle, a Spriggan is a deceptively deadly opponent. They do not carry weapons, but their long wooden claws can tear through leather and steel. More terrifyingly, they possess a unique magical connection to the wildlife around them. With a simple wave of their hands, a Spriggan can cast a spell that forces nearby animals to do their bidding. Peaceful deer, wild wolves, massive bears, and deadly saber-cats will all fall under the Spriggan's control, turning into a loyal army that attacks with mindless aggression. A lone traveller might think they are fighting a single forest spirit, only to find themselves surrounded by a pack of enraged beasts. Furthermore, Spriggans share a similar, yet different healing ability with trolls. When a Spriggan is severely wounded and on the verge of death, it can draw upon the life force of the surrounding earth. In a flash of green light, the Spriggan will completely restore its health, standing tall and fully healed. They can perform this miracle up to 2 times before their connection to the earth is severed, and they can finally be destroyed. To bypass this frustrating defense, one must use fire. Because their bodies are made of dry wood and sap, they are extremely vulnerable to flames. Fire magic not only inflicts massive damage on their wooden frames, but also disrupts their concentration, making it much harder for them to channel the healing energies of the earth. At the very center of a Spriggan's body lies its taproot, a concentrated knot of pure nature magic. For alchemists, this taproot is an invaluable ingredient, capable of boosting one's magical reserves or enhancing potions of illusion. However, obtaining a taproot is a deadly task, as it requires destroying the very spirit that guards it. In some dark corners of the world, Spriggans fall victim to the vile rituals of Hargravens. These corrupted witches will capture Spriggans, torture them, and use their magic to create the monstrous briar hearts, binding the power of nature to a mortal corpse. On the ash-covered island of Solstheim, a tragic variation of these spirits exists, known as burnt Spriggans. These creatures were scorched by the eruptions of Red Mountain. Their wood has turned to black charcoal, and the green light of nature has been replaced by a glowing molten orange. These corrupted spirits have lost their ability to heal themselves, but they have gained a volatile, explosive nature. They strike with burning claws, and when they are finally defeated, their bodies erupt in a blast of ash and flame, taking down their attackers with them. Moving out of the dense forests and into the wide-open plains and cold tundras, we find the largest native inhabitants of Tamriel, the giants. Standing over twice the height of an average orc, these massive humanoids are a common sight in the wilderness of Skyrim and the northern hills of High Rock. With their long, greying beards, pointed ears and weathered skin, they carry an air of ancient sorrow. They are a quiet, nomadic people who have roamed these lands since before the first human ships sailed from the frozen continent of Ost. In fact, many scholars believe that giants and Nords share a common ancestor. Ancient legends suggest that back in Atmora, the ancestors of men and giants were the same people. Over many centuries, this race split into two paths. One path became smaller, highly intelligent, and built the great cities of Skyrim. The other path grew massive in size, lost the use of spoken human language, and remained close to the earth. Today, the relationship between Nords and giants is tense but usually peaceful. In the past, Nords would paint a cow with strange runes and offer it to the giants as a peace offering. This traditional gesture kept the giants from raiding local farms, though the practice has sadly faded in recent times. The entire lifestyle of the giants revolves around their beloved mammoths. Giants are skilled herdsmen, guiding these massive, hairy beasts across the tundra in search of food. The bond between a giant and his mammoth is incredibly strong, almost like that of a father and his children. Giants protect their herds with their lives, and they use the mammoth's milk to create a thick, foul-smelling cheese that serves as their primary food source. This mammoth cheese is often stored in large stone bowls at the center of their camps, where it is left to cure near their massive bonfires. Despite their brutish appearance, giants possess a surprising capacity for emotion. Travelers in the volcanic region of Eastmarch have reported seeing a lone giant standing motionless by the edge of a hot spring, weeping silently over the carcass of his dead mammoth. He does not attack passers-by, he simply mourns his fallen companion in a display of grief that rivals any human loss. This emotional depth suggests that giants are far more than just mindless monsters. Giant camps are easy to spot from a distance. They are marked by towering bonfires that burn day and night, sending pillars of black smoke into the sky. Around these fires, the giants paint strange, swirling symbols on large rocks and tree trunks. While we do not fully understand the meaning of these paintings, they likely serve as boundary markers. Giants are not naturally aggressive creatures. If a traveler keeps their distance, a giant will simply watch them with quiet curiosity. However, if you step too close to their campfire, or if you make the fatal mistake of threatening one of their mammoths, the giant's peaceful nature vanishes instantly. When provoked, a giant is one of the most terrifying forces on Nirn. They wield massive clubs made of solid stone and thick tree branches, bound together with leather straps. A single blow from one of these clubs carries enough force to crush a horse or shatter the heavy iron shield of a seasoned warrior. Indeed, there are many documented accounts of adventurers being struck so hard by a giant's club that they were launched hundreds of feet into the air, falling to their deaths far from the battlefield. Because of this overwhelming physical power, fighting a giant up close is nearly suicidal. To defeat a giant, one must rely on speed, distance, and magic. Their massive size makes them slow and clumsy, meaning a swift archer or a clever mage can outmaneuver them on open ground. They have no natural resistance to magic, so frost spells can be used to slow their movements even further, while shock and fire spells can wear down their massive reserves of health. Poison is also highly effective, as their large bodies take time to filter out toxins. However, the golden rule of dealing with giants remains simple. It is always better to avoid them entirely. They are a proud, ancient people who simply wish to be left alone in the wild places they call home. As scholars of the Imperial Library, we must recognize that the wilds of Tamriel are not empty voids waiting to be conquered. They are living, breathing ecosystems protected by ancient guardians and dangerous predators. The trolls, the Spriggans, and the giants are not mere monsters to be hunted for sport or cleared away for new settlements. They are the true, native masters of Nirn's terrestrial landscapes. To ignore their power, to forget their elemental weaknesses, or to disrespect their territorial boundaries is to invite swift and violent death. For as long as the forests grow and the snow falls on the mountains, these beasts of the wild will remain, reminding us of the primal forces that truly govern our world. Chapter 10. Depths of Blackreach, Falmer and Chaurus. Deep beneath the frozen mountains of Skyrim lies a world forgotten by the sun. This is Blackreach, a colossal cavern of eternal twilight, lit only by the cold blue glow of giant mushrooms and silent ancient magic. To those who dwell on the surface, this underworld is a myth, a dark fairy tale told to scare children. But to the scholars of the Imperial Library, it is a documented nightmare, a massive tomb where one of the greatest tragedies of Tamriel still unfolds. Here, in the damp silence of the earth, lives a ruined race and the venomous monsters they call their brothers. To understand the tragedy of the Falmer, we must first look back to an age of light. Long before they were known as the blind monsters of the deep, they were the Snow Elves. They were a proud, beautiful, and highly advanced people. Their empire stretched across the surface of Skyrim, and their culture was said to rival even that of the High Elves of Somerset Isle. They built grand temples of white stone, dedicated to their chief god, Auriel. They were masters of magic, art, and philosophy, living in harmony with the cold northern climate. But this golden age did not last. The arrival of the early Nords, known as Atmarans, led to a brutal and bloody conflict for control of the land. After the legendary Night of Tears, when the Snow Elves destroyed the Nord city of Sarthal, the Nord hero Iskramor returned with his 500 companions. They waged a war of total extermination against the Snow Elves. Battle after battle, the Snow Elves were pushed back, their great cities burned, and their warriors slain. The final blow came at the Battle of the Mosring, where their heroic leader, the Snow Prince, was killed. With his death, the remaining Snow Elves were scattered, terrified, and desperate for survival. In their darkest hour, the surviving Snow Elves sought refuge underground. They turned to their distant cousins, the Dwemer, also known as the Dwarves. The Dwemer were a highly intelligent but cold and calculating race who lived in massive steam-powered cities deep within the earth. They agreed to offer the Snow Elves sanctuary, but they did not do so out of kindness. They demanded a terrible price for their protection. They forced the desperate Snow Elves to consume a toxic, glowing fungus that grew only in the deep dark of Blackreach. This toxic fungus was highly poisonous to the Snow Elves. It did not kill them, but it attacked their nervous systems and stripped them of their sight. Over generations of forced consumption, the blindness became permanent, burned into their very genetics. The Dwemer had deliberately blinded an entire race to ensure they could never rise up or pose a threat. Once the Snow Elves lost their sight, the Dwemer betrayed them completely. They turned their guests into slaves, forcing them to work in the deep mines and build the massive stone cities of the dwarves. For centuries, the Snow Elves lived in absolute darkness and brutal servitude. Under the heavy hand of the Dwemer, they lost their names, their history, and their proud culture. They forgot the warmth of the sun and the grace of Auriel. Their bodies began to change to adapt to their harsh underground prison. Their skin turned a pale, sickly green-white. Their ears grew large and pointed, sensitive to the slightest sound. Their posture became hunched, and their noses flattened to catch the scent of prey or danger. They were no longer the elegant Snow Elves of old. They had become the Falmer, a word that now meant the betrayed. Eventually, the anger of the enslaved Falmer could no longer be contained. They rose up against their dwarven masters in a bloody, secret rebellion known as the War of the Crag. For decades, this war raged in the deepest caverns, far beneath the feet of the surface dwellers. It was a war of absolute hatred, fought with silent ambush and brutal savagery. Then, in the year 700 of the First Era, the entire Dwemer race mysteriously vanished from the face of Nirn. The Falmer suddenly found themselves free, but they were also entirely alone. They were trapped in the dark, twisted by centuries of torture and poison, with no memory of who they once were. They did not return to the surface, for the sun now burned their sensitive skin and blinded their pale eyes. Instead, they claimed the empty Dwemer ruins and the deep caverns of Blackreach as their own. And in this dark empire, they found a strange companion, the Chaurus. The Chaurus is a giant, insect-like beast native to the deepest caves of Skyrim. It is a creature of pure malice, covered in a thick, dark green shell of chitin. It possesses razor-sharp mandibles that can easily bite through leather and flesh, and it is highly venomous. The Chaurus can spit a deadly burning acid that melts armor and poisons the blood of its victims. To any normal explorer, the Chaurus is a terrifying monster to be avoided at all costs. But to the Falmer, the Chaurus became their savior. Over the centuries, the Falmer developed a deep, symbiotic relationship with these venomous insects. Scholars believe the Falmer first began breeding them as a source of food and raw materials. Because they had no metalworking tools of their own, they turned to the bodies of the Chaurus. They harvested the thick chitin shells to craft their armor, shields and weapons. Falmer weapons are crude but incredibly sharp, often dipped in the very venom harvested from the living insects. They even used Chaurus chitin and hides to build their tents and reinforce their cave dwellings. The relationship between the Falmer and the Chaurus goes far beyond simple animal husbandry. It is a true partnership of the dark. The Falmer raise the Chaurus from small, pale eggs. They tend to the young larvae, feeding them and keeping them safe in deep, muddy pits. As the Chaurus grow, they are trained to act as guards, hunting companions, and war beasts. Because both the Falmer and the Chaurus are blind, they rely on sound, vibration, and smell to navigate. They move through the dark in perfect, silent unison, communicating through clicks, hisses, and the rustle of chitin. When the Falmer go to war or raid the surface, the Chaurus march alongside them. The heavy thud of the insects' legs and the hiss of their poison spit are often the last things an explorer hears before they are dragged into the dark. The Falmer have even bred larger, more terrifying variants of these beasts. The Chaurus Reaper is a massive, heavily armoured giant that can easily crush a fully armoured warrior. In recent years, scholars have also documented the Chaurus Hunter, a winged variant that emerges from a cocoon after a long period of dormancy. These flying nightmares rain poison from above, making the Falmer tunnels even more lethal. To look upon a Falmer camp is to see a society built entirely around this insectoid symbiosis. Their tents are made of stretched insect hides, held together by Chaurus ribs. Their lanterns are filled with the glowing fluids of subterranean creatures. They live in a constant state of damp, warm humidity, surrounded by the smell of decay, wet earth, and acidic poison. It is a horrifying alien way of life, yet it is undeniably successful. We must not make the mistake of thinking the Falmer are mere mindless beasts. Though they appear feral and act with savage cruelty, they retain a dark, twisted intelligence. They craft complex traps, brew powerful poisons, and utilize basic magic. They have a primitive form of tribal leadership, guided by powerful shamans who wield frost and lightning magic. They are not animals. They are a ruined civilization, driven mad by betrayal, living in a constant state of pain and hatred. For centuries, the Falmer remained deep underground, rarely seen by the people of Skyrim. But the scholars of the Imperial Library have noted a worrying trend in recent years. The Falmer are multiplying. Their numbers are growing, and their deep caverns can no longer hold them. They have begun to dig upwards, closer to the surface. Reports of lost travelers, raided trade caravans, and missing livestock near cave entrances have increased dramatically. When they raid the surface, they do not seek gold or land, they seek captives. They drag surface dwellers down into the dark, using them as slave labor or feeding them to their growing Chaurus nests. They hate the people of the surface, seeing them as the descendants of the Nords who stole their home and drove them into the hands of the Dwemer. To the Falmer, every human and elf on the surface is an enemy that must be destroyed or enslaved. The tragedy of the Falmer is a grim reminder of the cruelty of Tamriel's history. They were once a beautiful race of magic and light, betrayed by their cousins and deformed by the dark. Now, they are the undisputed kings of the underworld, ruling over the luminescent ruins of Blackreach with their venomous Chaurus companions. They wait in the darkness, their hatred festering, slowly preparing to reclaim the surface world that was once theirs. And if they ever do emerge in full force, the people of Skyrim will face a terror born from the deepest, darkest depths of the earth. Chapter 11. Anomalies of the Swamps. The Horrors of Argonia. For centuries, the scholars of the Imperial Library have looked toward the southeastern corner of Tamriel with a sense of quiet dread. This region is known to the Empire as Black Marsh, and to its native inhabitants as Argonia. It is a land of endless water, thick mud, and heavy, poisonous air. To most of the civilized races of Nirn, Argonia is not just a difficult place to live, it is a passive executioner. The air itself carries deadly diseases like the Nahartan flu, which wiped out entire civilizations of men and mer who dared to build cities on the swamp's borders. But the true danger of Black Marsh does not lie only in its invisible plagues. It lies in the terrifying creatures that hunt within its muddy depths. These animals are unlike anything else found on Nirn, possessing biological traits that defy normal classification. They are the anomalies of the swamp, designed by nature, or perhaps by something far more ancient, to keep outsiders from ever claiming Argonia for themselves. To understand the monsters of Black Marsh, one must first understand the metaphysical force that rules the province. This force is not a king or an emperor, but a silent race of ancient, sentient trees known as the Hist. Imperial scholars believe the Hist are among the oldest living things on Nirn, surviving from a time before the mortal world was even fully formed. The Hist do not simply grow in the dirt, they are deeply connected to the land, the water, and every living thing within the swamp. They possess a strange, powerful sap that can alter the minds and bodies of those who drink it. It is this sap that allowed the Argonians to develop their humanoid forms and high intelligence. However, the Hist can also use their power to mutate other creatures, shaping the fauna of the swamp into living weapons. In times of great danger, the swamp itself seems to change, producing monsters of unmatched scale and fury to defend its borders. Among the most legendary and terrifying of these monsters is the Wamasu. For many years, northern scholars believed the Wamasu was a myth, a story told by fearful sailors who ventured too close to the southern coastlines. But imperial expeditions have confirmed that these beasts are very real and very deadly. A Wamasu is a massive reptilian creature that resembles a dragon without wings. It possesses a long, thick body, 6 powerful legs, and jaws wide enough to swallow a horse whole. What makes the Wamasu truly unique, however, is its relationship with lightning. Down the creature's spine runs a series of jagged, armored plates that constantly crackle with raw electrical energy. The Wamasu generates this electricity internally, storing it within its muscles and scales. When it hunts or feels threatened, it can discharge this energy in devastating bursts, shooting bolts of blue lightning directly from its mouth, or sending electrical shocks through the surrounding water. Facing a Wamasu in combat is almost always fatal for an unprepared warrior. Because they live in wet, muddy environments, their electrical attacks are amplified by the water, making it incredibly difficult to find safe footing. Heavy iron or steel armor, which normally protects a soldier from claws and teeth, becomes a deadly trap when fighting a Wamasu, as it conducts the creature's lightning directly into the wearer's body. Imperial chroniclers suggest that the only way to survive an encounter with a Wamasu is to use insulating materials, such as treated leather, and to target the beast's softer underbelly. Its upper scales are thick enough to deflect heavy arrows and sword strikes, meaning that a direct frontal assault is a form of suicide. Historically, entire Imperial legions have been shattered by a single Wamasu defending its nesting grounds, proving that these swamp dragons are some of the most destructive predators in existence. While the Wamasu rules the land and the shallow shores, the deeper waterways of Argonia are home to the swamp leviathan. These are colossal aquatic predators that represent the absolute peak of reptile evolution in the marsh. A swamp leviathan is a massive beast, easily dwarfing the largest crocodiles of Cyrodiil. It is equipped with thick, heavy armor plates, rows of sharp spines along its back, and a wide jaw lined with long, curved tusks. Perhaps its most terrifying physical feature is its claws. A mature swamp leviathan possesses claws that can grow up to 9 feet in length, which it uses to tear through heavy vegetation, dig into the muddy banks, and impale its prey with ease. These beasts are ambush predators of the highest order. They can lie perfectly still beneath the dark, murky water for hours, waiting for an animal or an unlucky explorer to come to the water's edge to drink. When a swamp leviathan strikes, the water explodes in a violent rush of mud and foam. It drags its victims down into the deep, suffocating channels of the marsh, where its massive strength and aquatic agility give it a complete advantage. Even the native Argonians, who are master swimmers and comfortable in the water, treat the swamp leviathan with immense respect and fear. They do not hunt these creatures for food or sport. Instead, they view them as natural forces of the swamp that must be avoided at all costs. For Imperial supply boats attempting to navigate the inland rivers of Black Marsh, a swamp leviathan is a constant threat. A single blow from its massive tail, or a strike from its heavy claws, can easily shatter a wooden hull, leaving the crew stranded in the predator-filled waters. However, the natural predators of the swamp are not the only horrors that wander Argonia. Some of the most terrifying creatures are those directly mutated by the will of the Hist. The most famous and horrific example of this is the Argonian behemoth. Normally, Argonians are humanoid lizards of average height and build, capable of speech, tool use, and complex thought. But when the Hist are faced with an existential threat, such as a major invasion, they can choose to alter their children. By instructing specific Argonians to drink a highly concentrated, specialized type of Hist sap, the trees can trigger a rapid and violent transformation. The Argonians' bones crack and expand, their muscles swell to monstrous proportions, and their minds are stripped of all individuality, leaving only a primal urge to destroy the enemies of the forest. The resulting creature is a behemoth, a towering monster of muscle, scales, and pure rage. Standing far taller than any mortal, a behemoth is a living siege engine. It loses the ability to speak or use complex tools, relying instead on its massive fists and teeth to tear apart anyone in its path. Its scales become nearly impervious to normal weapons, and its breath becomes highly toxic, capable of spewing clouds of green poison that melt flesh and corrode metal. During the Oblivion Crisis, when the Daedric Prince Marunes Dagon opened portals across Tamriel, the Hist used this power to devastating effect. Under the influence of the Hist, the Argonians did not retreat. Instead, they drank the sap, transformed into behemoths, and poured into the Oblivion Gates, overwhelming the Daedric armies on their own burning ground. While the behemoth is a savior to the swamp, to the rest of Tamriel, it is a reminder of the terrifying control the Hist hold over flesh and bone. Another strange and mindless anomaly of the marsh is the voroplasm. Unlike the reptiles and mutated beasts, a voroplasm is not a creature of bone and blood. Instead, it is a rapid, moving pool of thick, green, acidic slime that lives in the deepest and most toxic parts of the swamp. Despite having no brain, eyes, or nervous system, the voroplasm behaves with a cruel, hunting intelligence. It can move quickly across both land and water, sliding over obstacles and flowing through small cracks to reach its prey. When a voroplasm makes contact with a living creature, it immediately begins to dissolve it. The slime carries a highly potent acid that melts skin, muscle, and even metal armor in a matter of seconds. As the voroplasm moves over its victim, it consumes the organic material, leaving behind nothing but clean white bones. But the horror does not end there. The voroplasm can actually enter the skeletal remains of its victims, using its own thick, gelatinous body to bind the bones back together and animate them. These are known as voroplasmic corpses, shambling skeletons filled with green slime that wander the swamp looking for more victims to feed the mass. Scholars believe the voroplasms may be a byproduct of ancient Argonian magic, or perhaps a natural waste product of the Hist's biological experiments. Regardless of their origin, they represent a threat that cannot be reasoned with, scared, or easily killed with physical weapons, as swords and arrows simply pass through their gelatinous bodies without causing harm. On the muddy floors of the southern wetlands, travellers must also watch for the Hajmota. These are large, heavily armoured creatures that resemble a cross between a giant turtle and a horned lizard. The Hajmota is covered in a massive, thick shell that protects it from almost all physical attacks, making it a walking fortress. They are masters of camouflage, capable of burying themselves deep in the thick mud of the swamp until only the top of their shell is visible, looking like an ordinary rock or mound of earth. When an unsuspecting animal walks by, the Hajmota bursts from the mud with surprising speed, using its sharp horns and powerful beak-like jaw to crush its prey. To make matters worse, the Hajmota can spit a thick, toxic mucus that slows down its victims and causes severe chemical burns, making escape nearly impossible once the ambush has begun. These creatures, from the lightning-wielding Wamarsu to the acid-filled voroplasm and the massive swamp leviathan, show us that Black Marsh is not just a geographical location. It is a living, breathing ecosystem that actively rejects foreign life. The anomalies of Argonia are not random mistakes of nature. They are a highly specialized immune system, guided by the ancient and inscrutable will of the Hist. For the scholars of the Imperial Library, studying these beasts is a humbling experience. It reminds us that despite the power of empires and the magic of the elves, there are places on Nirn where mortals are not welcome, and where the ancient forces of the world still rule with absolute, terrifying authority. Those who venture into the green dark of Argonia must remember that every step could be their last, and that the swamp is always watching, waiting to turn another explorer into nothing more than clean bones in the mud. Chapter 12. The Divine Disease. Ash Creatures of the Sixth House. Deep in the ash-choked wastes of Vardenfell, beneath the shadow of Red Mountain, lies a horror unlike any other in the history of Tamriel. For centuries, the Dunmer of Morrowind lived under the protection of their living gods, the Tribunal. Yet, in the dark corners of the province, an ancient and terrible power was stirring. This was the long-forgotten Sixth House, House Dagoth, led by the immortal being known as Dagoth-Ur. He did not seek to conquer with ordinary armies or simple weapons. Instead, he unleashed a plague. It was a physical and spiritual corruption known to the Empire as the Corpus disease, but referred to by its victims and creators as the Divine Disease. To study Corpus is to look into a dark mirror of divinity. Unlike common illnesses of Nirn, which weaken the body and eventually bring death, Corpus does something far more terrifying. It grants immortality. The cells of an infected person do not die. Instead, they grow and multiply without limit, much like a magical form of cancer. A victim of Corpus becomes completely immune to all other diseases, and they can no longer die of old age. Their body heals from deep wounds at an unnatural speed. Yet, this physical immortality comes at a horrifying price. The mind of the victim is slowly destroyed, replaced by a violent madness, while their body is warped into a grotesque mass of swollen, deformed flesh. The legendary wizard Divaeth Fear studied this condition for centuries in his Tower of Tel Fear. Within the deep, dark caverns beneath his home, he built the Corpusarium, a sanctuary and prison for those afflicted by the disease. His writings tell us that Corpus is not a natural infection, but a divine blessing that mortal bodies simply cannot handle. It is the raw power of the heart of Lorkhan, sent out by Dagoth through the ash storms, forcing mortal flesh to reshape itself in the image of a false god. For those who are not chosen by Dagoth, the disease is a chaotic curse of endless, painful growth. The first physical stage of this transformation produces the corporous stalker. These are the unfortunate souls who caught the disease by chance, perhaps from the bite of a corrupted beast, or by breathing the poisoned air near the ghost fence. In the early stages, the skin of a corporous stalker becomes pale and starts to tear. Huge, tumor-like growths erupt from their limbs and torso. As the disease eats away at their brain, they lose the ability to speak, to think, or to use tools. They become mindless, aggressive beasts, driven only by pain and a desperate hunger. They wander the wastes and ruins, crying out in agony as their bodies continue to swell and mutate. If a stalker survives long enough, they progress into the lame corpus. This is a later, even more deformed stage of the disease. The body of a lame corpus is a massive, bloated nightmare. Their limbs become so heavy and swollen with mutated muscle and excess skin that they can barely walk, instead dragging themselves forward with terrifying strength. Their faces are often completely lost beneath layers of folded, weeping flesh. Despite their slow movement, they are incredibly dangerous. The physical strength of a lame corpus is far greater than that of any normal mortal, and their bodies can regenerate from almost any injury in a matter of seconds. They represent the ultimate physical failure of the mortal body to contain the divine energy of the heart. However, there is another path. For those who hear the whispers of Dagoth in their sleep, the transformation is not a random curse, but a guided evolution. These individuals are the cultists and servants of the sixth house. Before they ever change physically, they are touched by the dreams. Citizens across Vardenfell, especially those of Dunmer blood, begin to have vivid, disturbing nightmares of a golden masked figure speaking to them from beneath a red mountain. These people are known as sleepers. Eventually, they leave their homes and walk into the ash wastes, drawn by a silent, telepathic call. When these willing servants reach the strongholds of the sixth house, their transformation begins. The first stage of this guided evolution is the ash zombie. To look upon an ash zombie is to understand the true horror of the sixth house. They are humanoids, but their faces have been hollowed out. The entire upper portion of their face, where the eyes, nose and forehead should be, has been completely removed, leaving a dark, empty cavity. Yet, despite having no eyes, they can see. Despite having no brain in the traditional sense, they move with purpose. They are no longer individual people. They are extensions of Dagoth will, acting as the foot soldiers of his growing army. As the divine influence refines the subject, the ash zombie evolves into an ash slave. These creatures are hunched, pale, and remarkably thin, their ribs showing through their grey skin. Unlike the mindless zombies, ash slaves retain a small portion of their intellect, which they use to practice destructive magic. They are often found in the deep caverns of the sixth house, kneeling before bizarre altars made of bone and ash. They speak in dry, hollow whispers, repeating the words of their master. They can summon powerful lightning to strike down any intruders who dare to disrupt their silent worship. Dari Joshtiamdur. The transformation continues to grow more complex and disturbing. The next stage is the Ash Ghoul, also known within the cult as an Ash Poet. In these creatures, the hollow space in the face is no longer empty. Out of the dark cavity where the face used to be, a long, fleshy, trunk-like tube begins to grow. This proboscis hangs down over their chest, moving like a living worm. Ash ghouls are highly intelligent, incredibly fast, and possess powerful magical abilities. Unlike the lower beasts of the plague, they can speak clearly. They speak of the coming of the Sharmat, of the fall of the false gods of the tribunal, and of the liberation of Morrowind from the Empire. They are the priests and generals of the lower ranks of the sixth house, organizing the cult's activities in secret bases across the island. The highest form of mortal transformation is the Ascended Sleeper. These are the most powerful and terrifying sorcerers of the sixth house. An ascended sleeper has ceased to look human in any way. They are tall, hovering figures wrapped in heavy robes, with massive, distorted heads. Their faces are a mass of multiple long tentacles and trunks, resembling ancient deep-sea monsters more than elves. They possess immense magical power, capable of tearing the minds of their enemies apart with telepathic assaults. They do not speak with voices, but project their thoughts directly into the minds of those around them, causing madness and terror. They are the high priests who stand closest to Dagoth, directing the grand plan to rebuild the ancient god construct, the Numidium. At the very top of this dark hierarchy are the Ash Vampires. These are not traditional vampires of Tamriel. They do not drink blood, nor do they fear the sun. Instead, they are the ancient, noble brothers and close allies of Dagoth from the First Era. They were once Dunmer lords, but through their connection to the heart of Lorcan, they were transformed into immortal demigods. They have long, clawed fingers, pale skin, and a third eye in the center of their foreheads. They are highly intelligent, proud, and possess absolute loyalty to their brother. Each Ash Vampire holds a portion of Dagoth own power, acting as anchors for his immortality. The threat of the Sixth House was not merely a threat of physical conquest, it was an existential danger to all life on Nirn. If Dagoth had succeeded in his plans, the Corpus disease would not have remained inside the ghost fence. The ash storms would have carried the divine plague across the sea to Cyrodiil, Skyrim, and beyond. Every living being in Tamriel would have been forced to undergo these horrific physical transformations, turning the entire continent into a silent, twisted empire of ash and flesh, ruled by a single, dreaming god. Though the Nerevarine eventually destroyed the heart's connection to Nirn and defeated Dagoth, the scars of the Sixth House remain. The ruins of their bases still sit in the dark corners of Vardenfell, and the memory of the Ash Dreams still haunts the descendants of those who survived. The divine disease was a grim reminder of what happens when mortal flesh is touched by the raw, untamed power of the gods. It showed that the line between a blessing and a curse is incredibly thin, and that sometimes immortality is the most terrifying punishment of all.